pandemic did at least give us this. And I think it was almost like they wanted this to be, impulsed, and it was. And it's been a great tool for me from far away, and really so that I get to kind of live this life by design that we've also mentioned that people talk about a lot, right? In this multifamily space and in wanting to generate passive income, is to live where you want to live and how you want to live, but still be able to do, what you want to do, and work wherever you want to work.
Welcome to the Healthy Investor Podcast with Bob Mastroianni, where you and I will learn from successful real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and other highly driven individuals about their journey and the healthy habits and routines that play an integral part of their growth. All right, welcome back to the Healthy Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Bob Mastroianni. Today, I have guest with me, Monica Lorenzo. Monica is a multifamily investor. She spent the past 21 years in different capacities within the real estate industry. And she began personally investing in real estate in 2011. She's done some fix and flip and some hold and also rental portfolio. And she's since transitioned into multifamily investing and is currently a partner in over 1,300 units valued at over $16 million. Monica is a native of New York City and was raised in an environment steeped in Latin American traditions. And she currently lives in Uruguay and invests in Florida, Nebraska, Kansas City, and Michigan. In her free time, she is a loving wife and devoted mother to her two children. And they enjoy travel, theater, movie, and sports. Monica, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here.
Yeah. So if you can, I'd like to dive in a little bit deeper to your story. So you began investing in 2011 and have taken on several different roles. Maybe you can go into a little bit of how that evolution happened for you and what brought you to where you are today, which is currently investing in multifamily.
Well, it was funny when you said the intro. I always forget that I've been in this business for 21 years in some capacity, and I just don't remember when I got old enough to say I've been at anything for over 20 years. Right? So that was already an eye opener, but it has been that long. And I'll never forget, because I started in real estate October of 2001, which was it was October 11th, actually, of 2001, which is 1 month exactly after September 11th. And so it was a really crazy time to be in New York City and getting into any type of business. And so the real estate business was no different. And so I ended up, because of the uncertainty in every sector of the economy, and I was going out to look for a job, I ended up having to go into real estate sales, which I hadn't anticipated, but I always liked real estate. And so I got a job in, real estate office and really started to learn the business from the sales aspect, and quickly transitioned. And I transitioned into property management after that, and on-site property management, and continued to kind of build up through the different sectors into working for a sponsor and operator in New York City, and working in asset management and leasing for their large Manhattan portfolio. And I learned a lot about the business and all those different roles in the different sectors, but I really didn't have the courage, let's say, or the opportunity at that time to invest myself per se, right? It really wasn't like it is now, where we as individuals can go out and be multifamily investors. When I was in New York City in 2007, I was working for a sponsor, and these deals were being done in the boardroom. I mean, they were being done with people, the suits coming together, on 57th and 8th. And we were doing a deal actually with a fund from Magic Johnson, so it's Kenyon Johnson Urban Funds, for repositioning of a building in Brooklyn, a landmark building. And that's how, these multifamily deals came together. They were usually major players that put these things together, not individuals like you and I. So I didn't think I could get into this field. And so I kind of eventually went the way of what we all do, right? Which is to go to the sort of single family space, or in, the condo space in South Miami. And there were opportunities to be had right after the great, sort of crash of 2007, 2008, and the whole mortgage debacle, right? So there were some opportunities down there, and thought I would take the plunge there because it was still cheaper than New York City real estate. So picked up some properties there to flip, and some to hang on to, which eventually became my rental portfolio down there. And then decided, like a lot of us do, that the scalability wasn't really there at, at the one unit at a time pace. So decided to transition to multifamily, sort of cashed in my chips on, the valuation and the appreciation that had happened on those properties, and dove into multifamily in early 2021. Started to do some limited partner investing, which I think is highly recommended to really start to learn the space. And then, eventually started networking and did some coaching programs, which I think is also fundamentally important if you're going to transition into this space. There's a big learning curve from single family and residential to multifamily. So, joined some programs just where you and I met, and then, learn to meet partners and who you can know, like, and trust. And, you break bread with folks a couple of times and start to figure out that you've got things in common. And so we started doing some deals, and so partnered with some really great folks in those markets that you mentioned, and here we are, full speed ahead.
Wow. So such a great story. So much I want to dive into and unravel there. So you worked in property management, and you said that you'd worked for a fund, I guess, or a
Yeah, I worked for a sponsor,
sponsor.
right? So an
Okay.
operator in New York City, and they came together with another sponsor from Colorado, which was actually working this fund, which was the Canyon Johnson Urban Fund. It was the fund that was partnered. Magic Johnson was partnered on that. And so what we did was we took a building, a landmark building in Brooklyn, and we did a condo conversion. It was predominantly offices and mostly dentist offices. And we took that and we made it into residential lofts and
Okay.
condos. And so that was a really interesting project, and a lot of learning to be done on that,
That's
on the
what I was going to
construction
say.
project management side too.
So you got to experience a little bit on the front end of seeing how these deals happen and watching them unfold. And I'm sure there were a lot of great experiences, learning experiences for you that you were able to eventually bring to your business, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, they were massive, the deals. So we just didn't, we didn't think to put them together at an individual level, right?
Sure.
And I guess I always thought they were that big, right? But you can really do multifamily from 5 units and above. But again, that goes a little bit to the learning and educating that that maybe should happen a little bit earlier on at the school level, that we really don't get to see too much of.
So one of the interesting things for me about you, and as you mentioned, you and I have met. I guess it's been over a year. We know each other now, and we also have some accountability calls that we've done together, and we've done some networking events together, boot camps together, and really spent some time together in educational aspects and also networking. One of the most interesting things about you and about your business model to me is that you currently live in Uruguay, and you're investing in Florida, Kansas City, Nebraska, Michigan. And oftentimes we hear people say things like, there are no deals in my area, or I don't know where to find deals. And you're really just getting it done. I mean, it's a flight for you to get to any of your properties. And, I know you do a bit of traveling, but I'd love to hear you just talk a little bit about what that process looks like and how you're able to find those deals, find the right partners, and operate those being so far away.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with networking, right? So I did take quite a few flights last year. Still not an outrageous number, but 4 to 5 flights to get to some of those events, to really meet people and spend time with people, because that has been the deciding factor for where to invest and who to partner with. That's probably first and foremost, and probably one of the most important things, like we've discussed, that offline, is that it's a marriage. It's 3 to 5 years together. At the very least, it's a relationship. And
Yeah.
so you've got to make sure, right, that your counterpart is somebody who you can trust, because you can't get there very quickly from far away. Or if it's somebody that I'm maybe bringing capital to a deal for, that that person's going to be in line with our goals and the things that we're trying to to accomplish as a project, at the project level. But I think even more so than that, there's with everything the pandemic brought, it did bring this, right? This sort of virtual connection that is now okay, right? Before, if I would have asked somebody for, it was Skype back then. I mean, you really didn't have a platform like Zoom. It wasn't an everyday term. But if I had asked somebody for a Skype, meeting, they would have been like, well, why don't you just come into the office, or why don't we just get together? And so you
Yeah.
didn't have that possibility, right? So the pandemic did at least give us this. And I think it was almost like they wanted this to be, impulsed, and it was. And it's been a great tool for me from far away, and really so that I get to kind of live this life by design that we've also mentioned that people talk about a lot, right? In this multifamily space, and in wanting to generate passive income, is to live where you want to live and how you want to live, but still be able to do, what you want to do, and work wherever you want to work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So another, attribute of yours that I think is extremely positive. So I recall the first time that we were on a call together, where we, as a group, you and I were a part of a group, and we were looking at an opportunity, and we were underwriting an opportunity. And I believe that the opportunity was in the Boston area, which neither you or I look to invest in Boston or live in that area. And I remember the very beginning of that call, when we went to start talking about the information, you were so dialed in to knowing the details about the community, about the prices, and really had done your homework on something that was, for us, probably an opportunity that maybe you were or weren't considering. I don't know for yourself, but you just had done the homework to really know the area. Has that become something that you feel is a necessity because of your distance, to be able to really educate yourself on the town, the area, the comps, and all of that? Or is that just something that you just always do? Because it was extremely impressive to me that I almost wanted to ask the question, have you ever been to this town?
I can't
Because
believe you remember that, first of all, to be honest with you. But yeah, I think it has to do with a little bit of kind of wanting to know what you're getting into, for sure. I also think it has a little bit to do with my real estate background, right? So that whole sales experience, and really comping out, and understanding that sometimes one block to the next can be the difference between a major valuation change, right? Whether
sure.
it's a school district that cuts off at, a major avenue, or really the caliber of the tenant base. Because a lot of the guys in the space, and gals, obviously, it's, a lot of the people in the space will focus heavily on the numbers. And I think we both know that you can really skew the numbers any way you want them to go.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yes, this is definitely worth that amount. And I really don't let people sort of get by with that answer. I'm looking, for kind of hard facts, and I'm looking for certain markers in the, in the Google Maps of, obviously, shops or things that I look for, to really understand whether those numbers are really feasible. Because at the end of the day, especially now that we have this sort of transitioning market cycle, right? I mean, I've been, again, in the real estate business for over 20 years, so I've seen a down cycle. I lived 2007, 2008, 2009, right? So rent concessions, to me, is not a line item in underwriting that has a zero in it, right? It's like it's something that we used to do. I mean, in New York City, we were renting $3,300 apartments near Columbia and NYU, and we were giving 2-month rent concessions to get those rented. So we were basically foregoing the bottom line to be able to just keep that rent on the rent roll for the lender. But these are, sort of things that you start to hone in when you have that experience of a down cycle, which is something that could, transpire now. So it's really important for me to make sure that I truly have an understanding of what the tenant base is going to look like, and whether they really are going to have the ability to pay those projected rents that some of the others, put in their underwriting, and that the real estate agents themselves also put out. And it's like overly ambitious sometimes,
Yeah.
offers that go out, right? So like it's part of that
Well,
process that I have.
one of my big lessons from 2022 is exactly what you were just saying about, we've seen so much rental increase. We've seen, rents go up in so many areas of the country, especially over the last 2 years, and in some areas very significantly. And one of my big lessons in 2022 was that one of my coaches really helped me to hone in on learning not only about rental increase, but can your tenant afford the rent? And not is someone currently paying that rent, because just because someone's currently paying a rent doesn't necessarily mean that they can afford it. Looking by zip code, by, as minute or as small as you can make that area, and then figuring out, okay, what are the average salaries, and can the average person in this area pay this rent? Because if not, at some point something has to give, and the last thing you want to give is the rent, right? So if someone's feels underwater month after month after month because their rent is higher than they really can afford, eventually you're going to be in a position, and when the market starts to take a turn, that's when it happens, right?
Absolutely. It's sad to say, but really so many people are just a paycheck away from not being able to afford their rent, right? So we have been in this continuous sort of up curve, right, from
Mm-hmm.
2009 to now, and it's been all um, just growth and rent increases because, again, they were accompanying, the market. But if we really do see a shift in 2023, I think a lot of people will be forced to change their living situation. We're
Yeah.
going to see that going back to live with mom and dad, right, or roommating or coupling up. That maybe hasn't happened in the last 8 years, but we will start to see those transitions again, depending on how long this persists, right? So it's important. It's important to take that into account, I think, and that it hasn't been uh, a real problem, and a lot of people haven't had to factor it in, but I think that they will, in the coming months, and so we'll see how that plays out. I think,
Yeah.
you know,
Yes, it was interesting to me because I was underwriting a deal, and there was a lot of talk about rental increase, rental increase, rental increase. And one of my coaches sort of pulled me aside and said, okay, let's go on, there are a couple different websites we can go to, and we can find out what people earn. What does the average household earn in the area that you're looking at? And digging deep into that was very eye-opening to me, because I've always understood, I guess, for my smaller rentals and my local rentals, I understand the idea that, we want them to, for every dollar of rent, they should earn $3 in income, right? So I understand that concept, right? We want to charge $1,000 a month. Well, they have to make at least $3,000 a month to qualify. But then to go even deeper and to say, okay, in that area, does the type of tenant that I'm looking for exist? Because if most people in that area are making $2,000 a month, and I need a tenant that makes $3,000 a month, then they may not fit for that property, and that may not be the right opportunity, and it may not. It's kind of the square peg round hole thing, right? You're trying to force something to happen, and you're trying to force a rental increase that may not exist for you.
right? You can't sort of you can't force a situation. So if it's not there, it's not there. And so that's where we as underwriters and as investors need to say, well, you know what, the deal just doesn't work. We
Yeah.
can't get to those numbers and the deal doesn't work. Can we look for an operational value add situation? Maybe, but is it enough to cover? And then you have to learn to let go and say, okay, well, we talk about that as well in our different educational platforms and things. You've got to analyze 100 deals to find one, right? And people don't understand that. They think, they're coming in back to back, and that's not the case. You've got to let a lot of them go for reasons just like that. So yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So one of the things that I really wanted to sort of deep dive with you, and you and I had a conversation earlier this year. I think it was in May. We were together in Tennessee, and you were speaking about in Uruguay helping to educate people to invest in real estate, and sort of the differences between investing in real estate and I guess there's obviously some cultural differences and understanding of actually investing in real estate. So I'd love to have you talk a little bit about that, and maybe some of the challenges and some of the value that you're providing for those people.
Sure. I think it's funny how in the U.S. we don't know too much about foreign markets, right? We're so big, it's just enough to cover within our own country. But one of the big benefits that people have in the U.S. that they don't realize is a mortgage, and that doesn't happen in a lot of other places in the world, you can believe it or not. And typically it has to do with their local currency and the inflation and how it doesn't really make sense for the banks to lend because of the fluctuations in currency, right? Um, so they have to start with a base of, you either have a property or you don't, and you have to pay for it cash if you want one. So that would already rule a lot of people out in the US, right? In the US, you've only got to come up with maybe 10 or 20% in most cases to get a mortgage. So it's really important for the US person to understand that and to really take advantage of that, right? Whereas let's say in South America at the very least, and I know that I have other contacts and people that I'm friendly with in Israel or in Italy. In most cases, it's a lot less common to have a mortgage. And in South America, it's almost null. And so everybody owns their property outright. And so they don't realize that their return on investment, because in some cases they own more than one, they've inherited from their parents or from a grandparent or an aunt and uncle perhaps. And so they just do what they've always done or what they've always known, which is to have that property and rent it out in their local currency, and then at a very poor cash on cash return, right? So you have to consider, like, if you own $100,000 apartment and you're making $400 in pesos, right? Let's say take that pesos and put it to the dollar equivalent, you're making $400 a month on a $100,000, where you could take that money and put it into multifamily or something else at an 8 pref, then you're making $800 a month on that same $100,000, right? So it's really trying to educate them on lending and on taking that money out of the property and diversifying it into something else that's going to yield a lot more money. So that's been one of my sort of big initiatives down here, is to transition them into US real estate, which it's already a challenge because it's far away, just like it happens for me as well. So there's a little bit of concern about something being far away, but really just trying to help them understand that you can make more money on the same amount of money, right, than just to have it invested into one thing. So just I've been really focusing on that, and then bringing in the Latin American investor to the US, to those in multifamily products, which doesn't really exist here. The multifamily product is not common in South America, because what happens? More often than not, a building is built based on pre-sales. So a developer group will come together, usually an architect, a construction company, an administrator, some financial investors. They'll buy a piece of land. The architect will do a building design, do some renders, and they'll go out and sell it to individual investors who will use it as a vehicle to park capital, right? As a way to park capital, let's say in dollars, because it does transact in dollars. And so they can, sort of put their money in there, at least for 3 years while the building gets built, right? And at the end of 3 years, they'll have an apartment that they can rent out for that $400 a month, let's say, for $100,000 or $120,000 that they put into that building. They waited 3 years without any type of return. There will hopefully be some appreciation from when they actually put the money down to when the building is able to be sold, because now you have a finished product to sell. So you have some appreciation there. But ultimately, it's, again, 3 years that your capital was parked without any return. And at the end of the day, that becomes a condominium structure, because you've got 20, 30 different people that put their money into this property, not one individual owner who purchased the whole thing and is now going back out to sell it. So they're not familiar with multifamily and what that entails. And I'll tell them, well, you're going to buy into this complex of 100 units. And they'll be like, well, so mine's which one? 201? No, you're not buying an apartment. You're a partner in this whole thing. And so just, again, educating them on what that opportunity looks like for them, right, is kind of been my big project for this year.
Wow. So we had this conversation back in May, and I've been thinking about it. I've thought about it several times, and it's one of the big reasons that I wanted to have you come on and talk about this, because I think, like you said, in America, I guess we just don't think about that. And, when you speak about no mortgage, right, one of the advantages that we often talk about for real estate is what we refer to as leverage, right? If I'm going to buy $100,000 property, I'm probably going to put $20,000 down. So, that changes your ROI significantly versus if I had to put the whole $100,000 down. But the other thing, as you were speaking, sort of a little light bulb went on in my head that, yes, I get the idea that they don't have mortgages, but also, oftentimes, and maybe obviously this is a cultural thing, but oftentimes for us as Americans, we access our capital by refinancing our properties, right? So, when the property value goes up from $100,000 to $200,000, you call up the bank and say, hey, I want to refinance and I want you to give me, I want to put $50,000 in my pocket or $60,000 in my pocket. I guess that's also another thing in South America, specifically in Uruguay, that just doesn't exist, correct?
It doesn't exist. People are property rich and cash poor. And so but they don't know. They don't know what they don't know. They don't know that that's their situation, right? Because it's just the way it's always been done. And a lot of times too, it's sort of, old country teachings, and it's, people here mostly from Spain and Italy and the countries that have gone through war. So the mantra is always like, well, at least, put the money in real estate. They can't take it away from you. They can't. So it'll always be there, right? And so they don't realize that if they sold that apartment that they have, it's worth $200,000. It's giving them, $700 in rent, and they put that into, down payments or investments at $50,000, right? 4 investments at $50,000. Aside from also getting a return, right, a cash on cash return on those 4 placements, they're now going to get appreciation in 4 different investments instead of an appreciation in 1, hopefully, right? So it's a really big mind shift that we also aren't taught in the US. I mean, I went through the high school system and the college system in the US. And when I was in accounting 1 and 2, it was like debits and credits, and you were just like, what the hell are they talking about, right? But they weren't really honing in on like the life skill, right, of like your house and how to get that to, to be an asset for you instead of a liability, right? And how to make it work for you. So I think fundamentally we're missing education at the US level as well, but we have a lot more to take advantage of. The leverage is a major component in the US that people need to take more advantage of.
Another one of my big takeaways from 2022, I believe it was either a podcast, or I'm not sure if it was a podcast or it was a book, but Logan Rankin, and I'll give Logan Rankin credit for this, because he said the ROI of equity is 0, right? There's no return on equity if it just sits there. And that just relates very well to what you're saying here, right? The people are property rich. They have these properties, and I guess the only way that they can access the money is to sell it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, in some markets you can access, but it's maybe like 20% LTV. So then does it make sense if they're only going to give you 20% of the value or 30% of the value if there is a market even for mortgages in some of these countries. So it's really kind of more of like a home equity loan, if you will, than anything else. So right, it's just sell the property, and that's what I end up telling a lot of people to do, is just sell the property and diversify, and it's been working phenomenal for a lot of people. But
that's great.
It's yeah.
Good for you to be able to provide that education. You're making a difference in lives, and I could just tell. We spoke about it before, and just hearing you talk about it now, you're very passionate about it, and you're definitely making a difference in people's lives. So good for you for doing that.
Thanks. I'm trying.
So I want to transition a little bit, just to talk, and again, you and I are speaking. We joked before we got on this call here, you have a Christmas tree in your background. However, it's summertime where you are, and your kids are ending their school year, and I have a Christmas tree downstairs, but we're having Christmas break, and it was 28 degrees this morning here. So I want to talk about habits, routines, healthy habits and routines, and tell me a little bit about what that looks like for you. Any sort of habits and routines that you have that you feel contribute to your personal, but also your business health.
Well, just so that it was 28 degrees here this morning as well, but just Celsius. So it was quite balmy, which I've had to get used to living in South America, but it's actually lovely. But it is weird to decorate like a palm tree, if you will, for Christmas. But yeah, no, it's it's been interesting because I've always been an athletic person. I played, sports in high school and in grammar school and coming up. I never played at the college level, but I was a very fit person always. And, I've had some medical things that came up on the radar like a few years ago. And so I developed osteoarthritis, which was like a before and after in my life, right? It just kind of like waking up in pain every day was kind of new to me. And I remember like when it first happened, I was literally like at my parents' kitchen table and visiting them. And I stood up and I got like locked. And my mom
Mm.
was like, let's go to the hospital. And I didn't know what it was. And it sort of made me transition into constant movement, right? Because I have to keep sort of greasing the wheels and the joints, if you will, in my body. So I've had to learn to take the time to go for walks, right, and get like my 10,000 steps in. And I've had to embrace yoga when I was a person that's like kind of very high energy, and it's like yoga's not a workout, right? And it's just like, okay, no, it is. And it's the kind of workout that I need, right? To stretch and elongate and do those things that are important to, my body and what my body's saying to me now. So I, I've learned to work all that in and exercise. And for a long time, I had been of the mindset, maybe it's because it's a New York thing too, where I'm like, I just got to go, go, go and keep moving. And I didn't think that exercise was important, and I didn't give it the space that it needed in my life. And I don't know if that arthritis thing was just like the, hey, wake up, like you need to keep moving. And it was, God and my body telling me like that's, what I need to do and stop, and to value that as a necessary part of my day. So that's really what I focus on. And I hit the gym, and I was also of the mindset that like if I didn't do an hour and a half workout, then it didn't count, right? It wasn't a good enough workout. It wasn't enough. So if I wasn't going to get that time in, I just wouldn't do it.
Mm.
Like, forget it. I'm not going to be able to do an hour, so forget it, I won't go. And I've just learned to say, you know what, gonna get 35 minutes in now, good enough. You know what I mean? Like, got to Zoom at 9, but I'll crank in 35 minutes, and it's going to give me like what I need to feel better, to have a clear mind, to work on my business and what I want for the rest of the day if I get this in, right? So that's kind of been where I am uh, with health and exercise.
Well, I love that. I love that. And you're so right. I've heard so many people say it. And sometimes to speed up, you need to slow down a little bit. I can tell you, I started my morning routine, I think in 2016. I started doing the Miracle Morning. And I did that for a little over 2 years. And now I sort of do my own version. But I'll never forget the first time that I did yoga. I did, I think it was P90X yoga, right? So I was doing P90X, and there's like a pretty long, I think it was like 45 or 50 minutes long yoga. And the first time that I did it, I wasn't sure I could make it an hour. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so boring. And I almost, because I was doing it early in the morning and it was part of a life transition, I started waking up early for the first time and all of that. I almost fell asleep during my yoga. But it is something that the better you become at balance, the better you become at stretching, the better you become at, like you said, elongating, you do feel better. I don't do enough. I don't do nearly enough yoga in my life. So maybe you'll inspire me now to try and get back to that a little bit more.
Yeah, I would love to, because honestly, like we spent with my husband like maybe 2 years where we would go to see different doctors, and everything came back to elongation and
Mm.
yoga and stretching. It was like, oh, I have in my neck and this and that. You got to stretch. Are you on the computer all day? Yeah. Are you on this? Yeah. You got to stretch. You got to stretch. He has 3 herniated discs. They're like, you got to stretch. Get on a ball. Hang over the ball. And I'm like, these are like old lady exercises. What are you sending me to do? Right? I was like, what are you talking about? And it was just like, no, this is the next chapter, right? So it's like, own your age and get on this next chapter. And then obviously once I transition, then you can do yoga at this crazy level. I mean, you could do like the asana and really just go to town with it. There's all different types of yoga, and I did hot yoga for a couple of years too, where it was like, I don't know what the degrees, like 90 degrees, 26 poses in like an hour and a half, and it was intense. And so I found that there was all different types of yoga to do as well, but I also felt like exponentially better when I did bring it into my life, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people undermine it, and it's important to do it. To intermix it with the other stuff. Everybody was on the CrossFit craze, and all you guys, I love you to death. You get up at all of our conferences at like 4 o'clock in the morning to run like a 10K before that, that first cup of coffee. And I'm just like trying to get down to the conference room coffee cups. And you guys have already run like a 15K, and I love you for it. My knees will never let me do that. But, there's different things that we can all do at different paces and different levels, and just be healthier, right?
Yeah. And just moving, I have, as a matter of fact, I've for years now, I've had sciatica, right? So my lower back and my one leg. And the more I move, the more active I am, the less pain I'm in. And it sounds like the exact opposite of what it should be, right? Because it's like, oh man, I have this back pain and I have this leg pain. I should just sit. But sitting, it makes it worse for me because your body just sort of contracts. And, when I'm regularly running, regularly stretching properly and exercising and moving, the pain doesn't exist almost. It's almost not even there. So I agree with that wholeheartedly. And, interestingly enough, for the first time ever, it's actually the opposite side over the last couple of months. So I'm trying to work that out. But yeah, when I'm in a position where I'm either sitting a lot, sitting at a desk, sitting at a computer all day long, or driving long distances, then all of a sudden the lower back, the backs of my legs, it starts to cramp up. And the way to make it feel better is to be active, to be moving.
Absolutely. And when everything is conspiring with us, right, to stay still and to stay sitting, whether it's the Netflix series or social media or even jobs now that are, we're constantly in front of the screen and we don't even have to commute to work, right? I remember having to walk 20 blocks to the train and then, do the train run and then walk another, 3 blocks on the other side when I got out of the train. And a lot of us don't have to do that anymore either. So we're losing out on even just the daily exercise. So yeah, it's important for sure. Moving is vital, I would
Yeah.
say.
Great. So I want to transition into the final questions. I want to be conscious of your time. I really appreciate you coming on. So I ask the same 3 questions of every guest on the Healthy Investor podcast. So for you, Monica, what is your definition of success?
Success, and I have to thank my husband for this, is owning your time to me, right? And that is one of the things that probably didn't learn early enough in life, right? Is to own your time is everything. And I want to say being there for family, whether it's my husband and my kids or my aging parents. Success is being able to be there for them when the going gets tough. And that's what I do this for, right? What I invest for and what I want to get out of this whole investor, let's say, role that I'm in.
Okay, great. So for someone who is new to investing or even learning to focus on their goals and their path to success, can you give a good book recommendation?
Lots of great books. I was torn about this one actually, but if you're just starting out in investing, I have to say the Purple Bible, right? So Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I can't say it enough. I think it should be required reading in high school for kids, and maybe at the junior senior level, and or if not, definitely in college. I think it's a first step in really understanding what, again, life, money, and time really, really mean.
Yeah, such a great recommendation. As a matter of fact, I'm in the process. I have to take care of something today, but I'm in the process of gifting that book to someone who's getting ready to graduate college, who's come to me for some real estate advice. And I just think it absolutely, Rich Dad Poor Dad is the first step. And it's going to set you up for the mindset shift of, what investing looks like and what money looks like. So great recommendation.
Absolutely.
So I want to thank you for coming on. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you giving back and of course your friendship. How can we support you and how can people reach out to you?
Email is probably the best way. I mean, I do have a US phone number, but I think email is always kind of a great first way to do an intro. They can reach me at Monica at Capterra Capital. So that's CAPTERRA capital.com. It's probably the best way to reach out to me, or just get in touch with Bob, and then he'll let you know how to get me on the horn.
Great. Okay. So final question, if you can think back with me to a young Monica around the ages of 10 to 12 years old, sort of knowing what you've learned so far on your journey, what are 3 pieces of advice that you would give to that young Monica, or really any pre-teenage child, to help guide them towards success?
It's difficult. I don't know if I would have listened at that age, but I was definitely entrepreneurial already, and I had started working when I was 13, which is not typical in the US. But um, again, the value of time, I don't think we teach it enough, and we put enough placement on and importance on that. And even now, it happens with my own children, where I want to like go back and save them from the mistakes, and we all have to sort of make our own. But trying to get them to understand that time is the most valuable thing, not money. Um, but at the same time, it's important to save, right? And I don't think that we have the save culture enough in the
Yeah.
US. And I definitely see it more here in South America, which is how people even get to buy a property outright in cash, right? So we have to learn a little bit more about the save culture. I wish I would have learned that early on. And then to start earlier in my real estate investing. I would definitely have started probably straight out of college. And I'm so excited when I see kids that like they're 16 or 18 and they have already read the, Kiyosaki, or have already started investing. And I'm like floored by, what they do when I see them again, 2 or 3 years later, and they've already got a couple of properties under their belts. And I really wish I could just go back and be like, just do it. You were working already great jobs. You already had, a way um, to get even financing in place. Invest, and early, as soon as you
Yeah.
can. So that's what I would definitely say.
Great advice. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Monica Lorenzo. Thank you to everyone who's listening today. If this made an impression on you, definitely reach out to Monica directly, and go out there and make it a great day. Thanks so much for joining me on the Healthy Investor Podcast. Check out the show notes for more information about connecting with our guest. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please head on over to iTunes and leave a positive rating and review. It would mean the world to me. I'm grateful for your support, and I wish you an abundance of success on your journey to healthy investments and a healthy life.